I got to tell you, pre-COVID, I traveled a lot. And so I would walk through the Dallas Love Field Airport and think, oh my goodness, we ought to be in here. Like, we truly ought to be here and in here. And you know how I am, Tex, kind of like world domination, takeover spirit. I'm like, we got to do a takeover of this airport. And of course, when I start to envision a complete takeover, having the Mavs out there, a whole new look, of course, you know who I thought about. There's one person who I know can carry out that vision for us, and that's, of course, you, Tex. So it was, thank you for like really leading and carrying out that vision. Why did you think it was a good fit for us?
I just think, it was an interesting time, obviously, with COVID hitting. And I just think it was something that we could do to obviously speak to the team spirit, but just also to uplift everybody, and their coming and goings. And it gave us an opportunity with the airport being down traffic-wise for a while, that when everybody got a chance to start to come back to travel, they got something that was warm and inviting and spoke to them from this city.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Dallas Love Field's Lead with Love. I'm Jason Roberts, founding director of the BetterBlock. And this gentleman with me is Reese Collins, the area redevelopment director for the city of Dallas. Welcome to Dallas Love Field's Lead with Love, Reese.
Oh, thank you, Jason. Appreciate you inviting me. Big shout out to the Lead with Love team as well. And hello to everyone out there on Facebook and YouTube. I'm proud that my favorite airport is championing the topics we'll be discussing today. So one thing that I definitely want to get into that we discussed about Love Field, one of my favorite things about it. And for me, it's kind of a tie because it's very easy to get into and use as a family. My wife and my two kids who are 1 and 4, we find it very easy. But I also remember when my mom was going to take flights, my family would go sit with her at the airport until she left. And that's just one of the reasons why I love Love Field.
I am in the same boat. I fly quite a bit. So it's the convenience you can't beat. You're talking about your small histories and stories. One I remember I loved when I was a kid is there used to be an old restaurant called 94th Aero Squadron. And it was done up like an old World War I tavern. I don't know if you remember this. This was in the 80s. And you could go there, and I loved airplanes growing up. And so my parents would take me there, and you could listen on a headset they provide you to the control tower. And I thought that was the coolest thing. So if there's one thing I would love to see brought back, it'd be somebody kind of championing that restaurant just so I can listen to the control tower again. So, all right. And remember, everyone, stay safe and mask up when you're in the airport. And one last note before we get on the show, y'all may have noticed we showed a clip of the Dallas Mavericks takeover of Level 2 and Garage C during the welcome video. Next time you fly out of Love Field, park with the Mavs. I'm so excited I've not actually used the C parking. I usually use B parking. So this will be my first time to give it a go on my next flight, which will probably be next week.
Nice. I can't wait to see it too. So the Mavs take over. But now let's get into the show. The Dallas Love Field's Lead with Love brings together voices from across North Texas to share stories of strong leadership, respect for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and a celebration of local culture that makes a difference in our community.
Leave your questions for us on Facebook or YouTube, and we'll do our best to answer as many as we can. But Reese, I want to start with, we've been friends for a bit here, and we're in kind of similar worlds. I've kind of focused on infrastructure and bikes and trolleys and places, and you're focused on housing and community development. I'm just kind of curious, like, why are you so passionate about it? Where was that spark that started that for you?
Wow, it's hard to say, but like on a more detailed, granular level, it really is just my family in general, from having a construction background, but also being a voice for people who just weren't able to do things on their own and have that type of advocacy and support. And I've found that in my previous jobs and in my current role to be here and help other people do better in their lives with home ownership, whether it's communities, whether it's just better use of spaces like we talk about on a consistent basis. What about you?
Yeah. Man, I remember traveling early on and going and seeing places that, I grew up in Garland in the suburbs of Dallas, and I hadn't seen places whenever I'd go to like Mexico City and see a beautiful plaza with like artists and small vendors and street food. And then I'd go to, Holland, and I'd ride on these bicycles on these great bike lanes and, have this great beer garden experience in Germany on these little streets. And for me, it was trying to figure out like, well, I love traveling these places. We all go when we vacation to these places we want to be, but we spend 50 hours a week, weeks a year working, and then 2 weeks a year going to a place we'd rather be, and how do we change that equation and make the place that we live the place we want to be, those 50 weeks. And so that for me was kind of my early thoughts, and how do I kind of start making some changes within kind of this constructs of what I have. So another question I had for you, Reese, we both started off as, these activists, right? You were with Habitat for Humanity, and I'm over here as an artist painting bike lanes and streets myself with neighbors and friends. And with time, and we're kind of, we're kind of feeling like we're fighting the man and against the system and trying to understand why we can't have the certain environments that we see in other places and what those issues are there. And eventually, now you're at City Hall and I lead a nonprofit. And so we've become the man, right? And so it's for me, I'm kind of curious your thoughts on that. Has things changed for you? Do you have a different perspective, or what is that perspective like now that you're from the outside to the inside on this?
Great question. Wow, and it's loaded, but I would say that my perspective has definitely changed, of course. But there's two different worlds of how the work is moving to impact the community, and both are vital to each other. So I definitely enjoy my time at Habitat, a lot of that grassroots impacting communities one by one. And then in shifting to the city, you're now looking at a larger view, and you're trying to impact communities one by one on that. I've also learned that the amount of work that these teams are putting in within the city are just amazing. You don't realize how many balls you're having to juggle at the same time to balance out. And yet teams are consistently putting out a positive product. And that's really exciting to me. It's definitely different, but the work that's happening within City Hall to create this change is definitely there. And that pumps me up a lot about what's going on.
Yeah, it's funny. I think about like my early perspective was like thinking, that there was this big struggle and that people were against you. But as I got to know the city and City Hall, I realized most everyone there was also, when they, started in school, passionate about community, passionate about making changes. And, what we have to navigate now is with time is just there's so many layers that have gotten created to make things, probably for good reasons and some that maybe are for reasons that are outdated, but just, that make things a little trickier to have it. Like just in general, like if we wanted, a house built today versus a house built 100 years ago. Well, now, we have triple pane glasses and insulated wires and extra firewalls, and we don't use asbestos because it's, it's bad. And labor costs are more, and maybe the materials and our expectations and standard of living, went from 2-bedroom, 1-bath houses to 3-bedroom, 2-bath houses so it grew in size. So that all came with that was this level of permitting and things that we had to get through in order to make those. In fact, I had an interesting equation. I talked to our city council member talking about how 75 to 80% of staff time on building permits is spent on allocating or finding ways to get parking in place, which I thought it's fascinating to see just these little nuances of things that didn't exist, 100 years ago as a city.
It's so true. And like, it goes back to just like what we were talking about before. Having that partnership is so key, because not one group, not one person can make these decisions, and constantly creating that environment to say, okay, here's why it works for me. Why does it work for you? How do we make this happen so that we're creating that community where everyone wants to be in and can be out and about on a regular basis?
Yeah, totally. I was thinking of an interesting story. We're both so focused on place, and making these great places for neighbors and communities. And I often will do a kickoff with groups when asking about what is your favorite place in a city. And so we can kind of like reverse engineer what it is they love about that, and so try to infuse those ideas into what they want to see in their own neighborhoods. And there's usually an answer I expect. And I was at Molina High School teaching architecture kids. I was like, what's your favorite place to kind of hang out in Dallas that you love to go to, be with your family and all, or friends? And I'm expecting like Clyde Warren Park. And I can easily break that down. I'm like, well, there's small food trucks here. There's great public spaces. There's places for elderly. There's places for kids to play. There's a dog park. It's mixed use. And these kids said, our place is the Valero gas station. And I remember thinking like, wow, like that's, it's hard to get to it. I mean, but to walk to it, they're going there before school. They're all going to get candy and soda like we did. And that's where they gather. But it's very difficult, to get in and out of the school, and that it's obviously prioritized for cars and not for people. And so I thought, thinking about what people think of place and how to improve upon it, there's a whole perspective that they've not been introduced to of the opportunities that exist. So that's something that I think is really for our work is going to be really important in trying to embed these ideas.
It does. And I mean, you said it, like it changes your mindset when you can have these different locations that are available for you. It makes it easier not having to worry about, okay, how am I going to get to the grocery store so I can get back in time to take care of X? And creating that and understanding exactly what places stand out is definitely a huge piece, though. I'm totally.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and it's like, one of the stats I thought was fascinating was like, if you, and sad is like, if you live in the wrong zip code, it can change your lifespan from up to 20 to 30 years. And there's several reasons for that. But if you think about, we're trying to infuse in ideas of mixed income housing, mixed infrastructure. The cost I tell people for just a car ownership in Dallas, they say is roughly about $700 a month. And that's like for registration, taxes, and, tire changes and gas and the car payments and insurance and all that, parking tickets and everything that goes with that. But we don't have in this equal kind of like bicycle infrastructure that would be much more inexpensive. So you can actually have, retain some income so you can put into other things in your life. Our public transit system is good, but it's minimized by we prioritize kind of a single occupancy vehicle. So because of that, it just a lot, if you want to take a bus to get to somewhere, that it might take you 2 hours versus having a car. So it makes it difficult for people to make that decision. How are you starting to see kind of this transformation with mixed income community and getting those things built into neighborhoods?
So, I mean, that is just the thing that we go in every day trying to tackle. And I know you're doing the same thing from a different angle. The first thing I think is important for everyone to understand is just when you're looking at mixed income communities, understanding what the ideal of a dollar is and how that impact is. A lot of people don't realize that HUD outlines income guidelines for the city of Dallas every year. And they say, here are what the thresholds are for someone that this many people in their family and how much money they make to determine if they're moderate income, low income, or upper moderate in that case. What most people don't realize is if you're a family of four and you make $89,000 or less, you're now considered into that low to moderate income bracket. Or look at it from if you're a single person and you're making less than $60,000 a year, I think it's 61 in that range, you're considered low to moderate income. And for some people, this could be teachers in your community, this could be nurses, this could be firefighters. There's a huge mix, but you don't naturally look at them and say, hey, that's a person who is living in this substandard housing. What it means essentially is that we want to create communities that help build bubbles to extend the reach and the use of certain areas. So a lot of people will look at our market value analysis and our housing policy that we put in place at housing. And what you'll see are these different investment areas that we have throughout there, where we're trying to expand that bubble with these mixed income families. And the whole reason is because that's how these communities survive and stay strong. everyone in every bracket may or may not use a grocery store. Some people may get it delivered. Everyone may or may not use that local convenience store that you referenced earlier. But by having a mixed income community, there's multiple sources supporting that. So that entire area can grow up as a whole, and it's really impactful long term. And so that's one thing that I think that it really falls in line with the work that you do every day on just how do you get from point A to point B? And just being able to get there by car isn't the only way for some people.
Yeah, it's funny. There's a stat we reference quite a bit talking about most kids have to get into a car just to get a gallon of milk. And that wasn't a reality for communities, 50, 60 years ago. So one of the struggles I think we face with the BetterBlock is we become so reliant on one type of infrastructure that it's if I try to modify that to infuse kind of in or mixed infrastructure opportunities, I have to kind of take away from the prioritize, which would be the single occupancy vehicle mode, and that becomes a real sticking point with communities, because understandably we become reliant on it. If I've got to get in the car to get a gallon of milk, if you're going to slow me down because you're going to make this car lane 6 lanes to 4 lanes and add great bike lanes, well, now it's taking me longer to go get that gallon of milk. So, I recognize that struggle we face, and it's really this balance that we have to kind of figure out to kind of inject these things in here and have people understand it's like tell people it's the difference between the slow food movement and the fast food movement, and getting people to understand that there's value in both.
That's so true. And, that's one thing that we talk about in multiple platforms, not just at the city, but incentivizing and encouraging developments, whether it's multifamily, whether it's single family, where it's improved streets in areas that have access to transportation, or to increase the use of that transportation, because the long-term ramifications are so great that that's just one of the passions that we have to how do we go correct this to help the next generation down the road.
Yeah, talk about generations, I was thinking too about just, culturally in America, we pride ourselves. The American dream is, moving out of, your parents' house and getting your own house and getting 2 cars. But that kind of goes against this idea of what the way society worked for thousands of years, which was intergenerational living, where you live with your parents and your grandparents, and they help take care of your kids while you went and worked. And, but now, imagine the 24-year-old kid who goes out on a date and says, this has been great. When I come back and meet my parents at my house, you'd be shunned. And so the cost associated with that, or even the loss of that culture, you think about like a Little Italy or Chinatown or something that has this intergenerational construct, and how that's manifested into the infrastructure, into the the way the streets look, the gateways that you enter into, and all those things that we there is obviously an upside to the way we've developed, but it also has this we are missing certain things. People talk about this loss of character and identity, and I think that can often comes with this constantly trading in one place for the next, and then getting away from kind of that family bubble that we all kind of lived in.
No, you're spot on. And that all funnels into the fact of a lot of us don't realize that just by having that home ownership or that community feel, you're breaking a lot of generational issues that were happening in families' lives, where they have that stable environment to come home to do homework, then go play with friends, to be in a location that they're coming to consistently. There's been a lot of studies that just outline that when you have a consistent place that you're consistently coming to, that you do better in life. And taking steps for us to create that is just beyond amazing. It's more understanding that it's bigger than us, so that we can continue to push that bar. So that's right in line with what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, so one of the kind of the big struggles that we are constantly having to manage too, and it, and it's brought up, I think, every time we start community discussions on what we should bring in and how to make changes and how to make improvements, is the question of the downsides of gentrification. And I don't know if it's something that, I'm sure it gets brought up with you quite a bit too, but it's interesting. You think about the way, in 1920, my neighborhood, which was basically 1920s, the Dallas population was about 210,000 people. And now we're at 1.3 million. And I tell people one of the big issues we face is a geometry problem. We don't have the space. Or if we do have the space, the space is there for us to create more density. But there's a frustration or presumption when you talk about density. People kind of think Shanghai and like towers of buildings and people stacked in place. Yeah. And in fact, one of the arguments that happened in the last election in Oak Cliff, our neighborhood, was, don't be careful of the development you add because it's going to turn us into uptown. And they're using uptown as a pejorative and saying, it's losing character and there's too many people. But one of my friends brought up, she said, you can stop that development. That's fine. But if you do, it won't be uptown. You're just going to make Highland Park issues, which is basically everybody, just all you have is single family detached homes, but the population is increased and you have a limited supply at that point. And so those prices are going to just skyrocket. So it's going to do what I think the kind of the passionate activist wants to kind of fight, which is what we're trying to fight alongside of. So, the tool, I'm curious about the tools you're using, because this is obviously a market-based issue we're having to address, a supply and demand issue. We're looking at things like developing community development corporations to help, neighbors grab parcels of land and kind of put those into a certain purview, or also, looking at, granny flats and things like that. Are you seeing other things that can help with this potential problem?
Yes, and I'll actually hit it from a couple different angles. I would say one thing for sure is the different organizations that are stepping up to help fight this. And it's really unique from a city's perspective because the city is working with everybody they possibly can to fight this, whether it's someone who's just starting mom and pop or just a small business owner, all the way up to somebody who is publicly traded, and trying to find these different avenues to create this active change that's happening throughout there. What's important about that is to know is that the land that the city does get, and specifically the housing department put back out into the community, is strategically focused to get mixed income housing. And so by taking those steps, other developers are saying, okay, how do I help push this along while still being able to not necessarily make a profit, but impact the community while at least breaking even? It's just really unique in a sense because the market's hot right now. And the fact that we still have groups that are trying to come in, it means a lot. We also understand that the price of lumber is impacting a lot of different things, although we're starting to see a slow decrease in that cost. We all know about the shortage of just the stock that's available. So trying to constantly push with that to create that type of mixed income community has just been a huge piece of our heart as we move forward in our department, that is.
Yeah, it's interesting. I realize now, I used to, part of my lamentation or lamenting of this was the sprawl that was happening out in the suburbs and things getting separated and basically becoming more reliant on cars and hurting, the environment with CO2 and the sedentary lifestyles and all those things that come with that. But I realize, as somebody who is kind of fighting for infill development that's more dense, that helps our parks and helps our public transit. Well, it takes a lot more education. It takes a lot more advocacy. It takes a lot more understanding. And it's a tough thing to get people to understand because, again, some presumptions on that. So I now understand why somebody just goes like, well, I'm going to go out to this farther flung exurb or suburb because I'm not going to have to deal with the community. And because that's too much work. And I just want to build these structures, and the city's going to provide pipes and the parking and all those other things. So it's, I'm kind of curious about programmatically some interesting things that you're seeing, because you have an array of things. Are there some cool programs you're starting to see come about that people like me, if I wanted to develop something like a small granny flat or help, like at that parcel next to me, like I'd love to create a duplex or anything like that? Or is there studies that you're seeing around the country that you're saying would be nice here? Anything like that you're seeing?
Man, a few. So I can go from modular homes. You talked about ADUs. I would say the first and foremost, the biggest thing is what we call the NOFA, the Notice of Funding Availability. Every year we get federal funds. We might potentially get some funds from the current bailout plan that's coming out. And what it basically does is it helps provide gap financing for developers who are wanting to build. And that's on a small scale all the way up to a large scale. On the other end, we do have a land bank program / land transfer where the city will take land back for multiple reasons, essentially, and then we'll put it back on the market for sale to build different properties, if they want to find different use for it, like you were referencing, they can come to us and pitch that so we can have that conversation. We're not turning anybody away. We're speaking with everybody that comes in the door. And it's really been interesting to see that component of it. But lastly, I would say the one that's been popping up a lot is the modular homes. And for those who are not familiar with the modular home concept, basically assume that it's already been pre-made and you're putting the pieces together when you get on site. Now, it still has to fit onto a slab of concrete and be fixed to the ground, because a lot of people think of mobile homes in that sense, but that's not what this case is. And so they have that option to take that route, and we're working through that. But I will say, other than modular homes, the biggest thing is how do we create these mixed income environment with a home that they can afford? And understanding that these prices are sometimes out of our control, putting them near a DART station, putting them near where they can bike somewhere carries that much more weight. Because like you referenced earlier, you said it was $700 for a car. Well, what if I eliminate that $700 a month? Now I have $700 of more expendable income that I can go do better for my family, get to where I need to be, maybe have a better bike so I can get from point A to point B.
I tell people $700 a month, that's on like a flight to Paris, like that's like, imagine a month, what we're spending on just to kind of get to and from places, which is, it's hard to imagine. It's hard to believe.
It is. And, so gentrification, to answer your initial part, is something that we definitely hear regularly. And unfortunately, a lot of people on our staff have experienced gentrification when it comes to their homes not even looking the same anymore. But how do we get in there and help get down there is something that we're working every day with our programs, from home repair that takes place throughout the city, some in our historical neighborhoods. We have down payment assistance to help people. One of my personal favorite programs is our targeted down payment assistance for those who are police, firefighters, security professionals, medical professionals. We have programs to help them purchase homes within the city of Dallas. We understand that right now it's tough to find a home. Right now it's tough to have enough money the correct way so that you can go and get a mortgage with a low interest rate. The city is here to help with that. And that's something that's exciting, because when we reference nonprofits at the beginning and even at Habitat, everyone has this shared collective goal. And it's a huge piece. So it's one thing that is huge when we talk with you about that, so we can just know how you guys are moving forward.
Nice. All right, y'all. Let's have a little fun with some rapid fire questions now. So, Reese, I want to know, what is your walk-on song and why that song?
Oh, wow. Okay, so I'm going to have to go with Young Jeezy, and it's Put On for My City. Whatever it is about this song, it's like I want to do so much that I want to put on. So that's definitely my biggest one right there. Nice. How about for you?
I'm going to have to go, and this is very selfishly, because, I've got a little restaurant and bar called Revelers Hall, and we have a band called the Revelers Hall Band, which you guys can all go to Spotify. You can listen to Lead with Love, and then go pull up Revelers Hall Band, pull up a song called Always There, which was the first single we released with the band. And I jokingly tell people, if 1,000 people listen to it, maybe I'll get 13 cents from it. So that's my walk-on song. All right. Your favorite restaurant at Love Field, and what do you love to get?
So I'm calling it a restaurant. I think most people are too. It's definitely Baskin Robbins. Go in there and get some ice cream or sherbet, however you want to look at it. They all have like a little kind of smoothie-like thing that's really good. That's my favorite. I know my kids love it too, my wife. How about for you?
I would say, so La Madeleine's my go-to. I'm a big Francophile, I like French things in general, help kind of start the Bastille on Bishop event in Oak Cliff. But beyond that too, the line for Starbucks has gotten so long because everyone loves a good cup of coffee before they go. I found if you go to La Madeleine, you can get that coffee even faster, and also get like a croissant and hang out as well. So that's mine. All right. And now, what does Lead with Love mean to you?
Man, to me, it's two things. Number one, did I do something today to help somebody else get ahead? And the other one is encouraging other people to do the same thing. I know we talk about that daily. It's just, how can we help make this a better place, no matter what your background, where you're from? That's what it means to me.
Got it. All right. And for me, I would say, we talk about with our work that you can either build places based on fears or based on our love. And if it's built on fears, we're gonna make the sidewalks smaller because we don't want people walking there. We're gonna put bars up on the park benches because we don't want homeless people sleeping on there. But if you build with love, you take those bars off. You let anyone sit there. You let it feel inviting for all. You let everybody feel welcome to this space. And then the problems that people presume, if you make things based on our fears, it just makes places more inhospitable for everyone. So if we lead with love, I think with the way we build things, we get the kind of environments we've always loved.
Love that. Love that. So now it's time for our live Q&A. So if you're listening to this on the podcast or if you're online right now, you can also ask your questions during the live stream every other Tuesday at 12:30 on the Dallas Love Field Facebook and YouTube pages. So we're going to jump right into it. So the first one says, do small independent businesses have an advantage being integrated into mixed income communities? That's a great question. You want to tackle that, Jason?
Yeah. Well, as somebody who has, a couple restaurants, I've got Oddfellows and Revelers Hall and Bishop Arts. I say it's been incredible. If you walk out, what I love, you at 7 a.m., if you're walking to the Bishop Arts area, you'll see all of these people that are the workers that come like our back of the house and our front of the house. Many of them live in the neighborhood and they're just walking out in the morning. When they're also being integrated into the neighborhood, whenever we would have like the big snow outage that took out a lot of the city, like the neighbors all would come out to that lived in the neighborhood, just came, and we set up we had power at our place where a lot of people didn't have power during that big power outage. And, we set up Wi-Fi for everybody and just said, just set up, we'll get you a cup of coffee. Don't worry about, just get warm while you can have access to power. Yeah. And you do the programming too in the neighborhoods based on the kind of the interesting, unique specialties and the culture that exists in that neighborhood, and celebrate yourself as a neighborhood. So that to me, I think is an advantage of being a small independent business versus a kind of a large that doesn't really understand the uniqueness of that small community.
That was
any other questions?
I can't beat that question. That's you right there.
So this is for you. Looks like, what are the steps the city is taking to help low to moderate income families become homeowners?
Great question. Yeah. So one of the steps that we're taking, other than you heard from the NOFA applications and trying to create more housing, we're also down in different communities helping with repairs so people stay in their community, where unfortunately sometimes those owners pass away, where we have a TAPA program, which essentially it helps families to have to prevent lien and estate issues so that they can actually acquire that property and live in there to create those communities. The other one, of course, is our down payment assistance program to provide funding to help people get into homes with minimal restrictions so that we can basically better serve them. So those are the biggest things that we have on a daily basis. Feel free to reach out to us at the City of Dallas. You can go online. If people go through Google, City of Dallas Housing Department, or DHAPloans.com is a direct spot. So anything we do to help.
All right. Any other questions? Let's see. Reese, this one's for you. It's like, where can people find information about the City of Dallas programs that you've mentioned?
Got you. Just hit a little bit of that. The best thing to do is go to the City of Dallas website and type in housing, and you'll get right to us. There are multiple programs, or you can go to DHAPloans.com, DHAPloans.com.
All right. Looks like that's it. Don't forget to check out every episode of Dallas Love Field's Lead with Love, wherever you get your podcasts, and share it with people you love. Head on over to Apple Podcasts to leave a 5-star rating and support Love Field Airport. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.